So today I wanted to welcome Maya um, to our um, to our AMA about Kenzie Academy, about her experience breaking into tech. Um, as all of you know, this journey uh, is pretty challenging. Like my co-founders and I have gone through this. There's a number of you who are now enrolled in boot camps. Some are preparing, and some are getting close to graduating and looking for a job. And so, the same way we do on the Breaking into Startups podcast, we invite guests who have done it before. And you don't need to be a mentor. You don't need to find a mentor who is 5 years senior than you or 10 years senior than you. Um, Usually, the people who've done it recently have way more tactical advice. And for that reason, I also want to give a shout out to Erica from Kenzie. She put me in touch with Maya. And today we have a very special guest. Um, Maya is a UX engineer. And in a second, we'll dive into talking about what that job entails. Maya also completed Kenzie Academy. She already graduated, uh, and she found her job as a UX engineer back in March. And so I want to just welcome Maya and welcome her to the community. Thanks for joining in, Maya.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Hey, everyone. There's a lot
Yeah.
of people here.
Hey, thank you so
Hey.
much for joining in. And let me just kind of give everyone an agenda for today. We're basically gonna just kick off the AMA with me just asking Maya a few questions about her experience, her background, and then after about 10, 15 minutes, we're gonna pass it over to all of you, and then you get to ask questions around the application process, job search, what the job entails, and so on. Okay? And so, Maya, before you did Kenzie, we'd love for you to kind of share a little bit about your backstory. Like, what were you doing before you decided to do this career transition?
Yeah, so I graduated college in 2015. I have a pre-med degree, exercise science,
Hmm.
and I was thinking about going. I was working as a personal trainer, thinking about going to physical therapy or nursing school. Um, So in the meantime, I was in Teach for America. So I was a math teacher for for a while I was teaching, I don't know, a lot of emotions come through when you're teaching eighth grade. I loved it with everything. Uh, but for me, seeing like my students lacking so much in their STEM skills, um, my school, it was a low income school, and like, for instance, the kids didn't even go to science class every day. They went twice a week, which is interesting. But that's really what got me more interested into the technology part of STEM, just because it's what got them excited and interested, because like every kid loves gaming.
Yeah.
Um, so then my mom, she suggested like, hey, why don't you look into getting into tech? And growing up, my mom was a software engineer. My brother and my cousin are currently software engineers. So it's kind of been like a thing in my family. So then I decided to start teaching myself basic HTML and CSS. And it was pretty fun. It wasn't too challenging. And then really from there, my mom kind of took it a step further, like, hey, why don't you try going to a boot camp like your brother?
Hmm.
It'll be way faster than medical school, and you can even like work in the medical field. And I'm like, huh, that's cool. So I applied for Kenzie Academy kind of on a whim. I figured
Yeah.
if I get in, then I'll get in now and then think about it later. Uh, so yeah, got in, thought about it, decided to take the plunge, and now that was January of 2018. And at the time, Kenzie was just an in-person program, and I was
Mhm.
teaching in New Orleans. So I moved here to Indy from New Orleans for Kenzie, and I'm still here working in downtown Indy.
Awesome. That's really cool, Maya. And I want to shout out to your mom for putting you on this path and kind of pushing you towards it. I love that. And we actually have a few mom daughters in the community and like dad sons who are going through this together. You mentioned you have a brother who did a coding boot camp. How did it, like, because to a lot of people, the coding bootcamp idea is recent. People think you need college degrees in order for you to get into these, I mean, college degrees in computer science in order for people to get into these roles. How did it work out for your brother? Did he also ended up getting a job, and like, kind of what pushed you towards coding boot camps? Like, when did you know that this is something you wanted to do?
For me, I knew I wanted to come into tech after kind of just taking time to learn it on my own. Just because probably since it's been like in my face for my whole life, I've kind of shied away from it for that reason. But my brother, about, I want to say 3 years before I went to Kenzie, he went through a boot camp. He went through 1150 Academy, which is another one here in Indianapolis. And then he learned .NET, and then that was like a 2-week boot camp. And he was an apprentice after that for 1150, and then got a job doing .NET. And then he decided to learn like all of front-end development, so pretty much JavaScript. And he did that at 1150, which is now, it's closed now. But his experience was a bit different than mine, just because his first boot camp was 2 weeks, and then his front-end program was 3 months. And then Kenzie, the shortest program they have is 6 months. So I think that worked out better for me, just because I pretty much came in knowing nothing at all, and I liked having the idea of having that time to really understand things and to pretty much do things more than one time.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I also did a coding bootcamp that was about 12 weeks, and I definitely felt like there was a lot more for me to learn. So 6 months to a year definitely gives you enough time to build projects, dive into technologies, and understand it. What I tell people in the grand scheme of things, if you just master the topics as you're going through them during school, then by the time job search come around, you'll just be more ready for the job search, and you'll spend less time going to interviews and getting rejected. In your case, so you decided to do Kenzie, you uplifted yourself from New Orleans and you moved to Indiana. What was your experience like doing Kenzie?
Well, long story short, it was fabulous. I am one of those people that is diehard Kenzie Academy. I love the experience with everything. I was a part of the very first software engineering cohort. So when Kenzie was literally just a landing page, and I just knew about a rich guy that was starting a boot camp, that's when I joined. And the cohort was so small, the whole academy, it was 14 of us. And now there's hundreds and hundreds of people. But pretty much to its core, the same thing now as it was then is the sense of community there. It's definitely a place where they have the mindset of it takes a village to raise a child, even though we're all fully functioning adults. However, there's someone there for the front end part. There's someone there specifically for React, someone there specifically for the graphic design part of design, every little thing, and it kind of all comes together as a unit. The help that I got from the different instructors, and even our coaches, because we had mentors at the time that were coming from the Iron Yard, because it was right when the Iron Yard closed. So yeah, just really the help that I got there was great. The opportunities to speak with people that are where I wanted to be. Chalk, the CEO, he would always bring in speakers from Silicon Valley, from New York. He'd literally fly them in and pay for their stay to talk to literally not even 20 students. And that's something that I definitely valued. It's how we got acquainted with Ruben and Career Karma, because again, Chalk met him, and then they hit it off, and then he ended up flying him out. So it's a really cool thing to be able to be like face to face with those people and know what they're talking about. And like, yeah, it's all great.
Yeah. And since you have the teaching background, a lot of people come to me when it comes to learning code, they think they need to memorize everything, when in reality, it's about understanding concepts, applying it. How would you say the experience of learning at Kenzie is different than like the traditional teaching style of like high schools or colleges, where like you have teachers, you have lectures, and so on? What would you say are some of the biggest differences?
Yeah, so Kenzie, they call it a flipped classroom format. Essentially, it's project-based learning. So whereas like a traditional school, you come in and the instructor like has this grand lecture, and like you're listening, you're absorbing, you're taking notes, you're asking questions when you're able. Kenzie kind of, it's kind of the opposite of that, in a sense that like they want to throw you into the fire, if you will. It's not as intimidating as it sounds, but the way that, from Kenzie's point of view, the way that we learn best is by doing. So essentially, we'll have like a night of like pre-reading about the subject, like generally, and then it can kind of get into a little bit more detail if you choose to read that far. And then the next day you have a project about it, and then you get a couple of days depending on the complexity of the project, but you're like there kind of learning as you go, figuring out how to solve the problem using context clues from things you learned prior, because a lot of it builds. And then in that time, they'll have like demos. So they'll put on Slack, how many people are having trouble with this? Or I've gotten a lot of questions about this. Let's have a demo at 1:00. And then we'll all like sit down and kind of like go through it together. So doing it that way, for me and for most everyone there, like it sticks a little bit better, because you remember when you were confused, and then you remembered like what you Googled to solve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of explaining it. And I see there's a bunch of questions in the chat. We are gonna get to them. My last question to you is about your job search. How did that go for you after you graduated from Kenzie? Did you feel like you were prepared? And how did you like end up where you are today?
For me, my job search was pretty good. I got hired. I got my job offer and accepted my offer, I think a week before graduation. And I actually started we graduated at 9 in the morning, and then I went to start my job at 1 p.m. So that was kind of cool. It wasn't a hard process at all. Kenzie does help people with job placement. I was not one of those people that utilized that. I found my job on my own through just like applying through boards. But my instructors were always there to help me with interview prep. One specific instructor, her name is Justine for UX, she literally did 3 mock interviews with me, and she lives in New York. So we were like on video chat for 2 hours at a time. She's like, no, I think you need to do it again. So I'm going to call you tomorrow at this time. And like, yeah, it was great.
Awesome.
Is the Kenzie bootcamp paid?
So I think this is a good segue into opening it up for our community to ask you questions. I would just ask our community managers, our community members, to introduce themselves and share like what their interest is, whether it's data science, design, engineering, and maybe share like where you're coming from, just so Maya gets an idea of like kind of who you are. Anybody wants to jump in and ask Maya questions?
I guess I'll jump in and ask. Hi, Maya. I'm Charlotte. Recently, last night, I started to figure out my career is supposed to be software engineering, because the same as you, it was pushed in my face a lot in my life, and I kind of shied away from it. how did you find that motivation when it got really hard to keep going, to push through it and to continue on with your goal?
For me personally, I leaned a lot on my family, just because it was a very big transition, like moving back here for this. So kind of like talking with people who have been through that. Like I said, my brother with his boot camp, and then my mom actually, so she was a software engineer my whole life from like the 80s to early 2000s. And she even did a similar program to like the boot camp format that is today. So having both of them as resources really helped, really finding community within your community at Kenzie or wherever you choose to go. Because really doing a program like these accelerated boot camps, they take a lot mentally, and like it's definitely a thing that many don't understand just because it's very strenuous, but it definitely like it pays off. I wouldn't do it any other way. So really just really leaning on the people around you, because like they know they're tired too, and like you're gonna be friends with them after this, hopefully. So yeah, I think that's a big thing. And then kind of just looking in the mirror and to be pretty candid, like knowing like here in Indianapolis, tech is very male and very white. And many times it's just me there. So kind of knowing that there needs to be someone in the room and there needs to be like that space. So that's also like motivation for me. I don't know if that's motivation for you or if it's a bit more intimidating. But yeah, there's also that, like people are looking over to you and looking up to you because it's not the norm depending on your area.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome.
Hi, so I'm Crystal and I'm new to this. This is like day 3 on the 21-day challenge, and I'm already getting overwhelmed with the applications because they ask so many questions like how experienced are you with coding, and honestly for pretty much all the programs I'm just beginning new. And so when I applied for Lambda, I submitted my application, and then they tell me, well, Texas has laws that are withholding us from accepting Texas applicants at this time. And I'm like, wow, because I really had set my mind to pursuing this technology degree and pursuing this career in technology. I've also tried other schools at this point. I'm not just going to stop at that one coding boot camp, but I definitely want to know some tips like, what should I say on these applications? What's the best way to, describe my goals or why I feel like, I should be accepted into the program? Like, what are they looking for?
So I'm going to speak to Kenzie only just because that's the one that I have experience with. But I feel like this is probably true for most, if not all boot camps, that they're not, looking for the smartest person, because I don't know, that person probably decided 20 years ago that they were going to do this, and then they went to go get a computer science degree. But it's more so just like at Kenzie, it's about your critical thinking and your problem solving, and culture fit. So like, essentially, are you going to give up when you're given problems? Like in the interview, they have riddles or like simple whiteboarding things for people that did have coding experience. And there have been some people in those interviews where they're just completely stumped because it's a brain teaser. It's supposed to stump you. But are you going to be that person that like laughs it off and says, oh, I don't know, and like make a joke? Or are you going to actually like try and work through it, So I think for Kenzie Academy specifically, that's what they look for. They look for, are you going to use your brain without asking every single question? Are you going to try and find the answer? Are you going to like attempt to be your best self at this? because like those skills can be taught. And that's kind of the mindset that they have. It's the mindset that I think anyone should have, because, you know, we all come from different backgrounds. We may or may not be good at math, but like once we learn the code, then we kind of know it and we can keep going. So definitely be true with what you want to do, I think. Like, don't try and sound impressive, because your story is probably more cooler than you think, you know? So I think that's the biggest thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I would add that a lot of people, they kind of stress themselves out before the interviews or through the application process. It's very different applying to like a boot camp than applying to college. When you apply to a boot camp, they make it pretty clear for you to know like what's expected of you. And they also give you time to prepare. Like if you feel like you're not ready now, they'll be like, well, do Kenzie's free prep. And then you'll be ready for the next step. And most of the schools do that. They want to have you, they just want to make sure that you're also ready before you start, like when you start on day one, so then you can keep up with the rest of the people in your class. Crystal, to your question about Texas and boot camps, I know there's a number of schools that recently don't offer classes in Texas, but I believe Kenzie does. And I would still reach out to schools and speak to their admissions, and this goes for everyone, because you might find out about a living stipend. Kenzie has like part-time jobs that they offer. Some schools have scholarships. So on this journey, you want to speak to a lot of multiple different schools. That's why in the beginning, it might seem you might be a little overwhelmed, but also realize that at any point you can take a step back and go at your own pace. There is no one telling you to do everything at once. You basically go however fast you want to go. Cool. Anybody else wants to jump in and ask Maya more questions?
My name is Robert Kala. I'm from California. I barely started today. It seems really, really cool. I just want to note, put that out there that I just got out of prison. But while I was in prison, I was reading a lot of coding books. And it seemed kind of, you know, like coincidental that I got this opportunity to join this. And I just want to know, like, if the background, is there any discrepancy, like if you have a bad background, or like should I have to worry about that at all?
What did you say your name was? Was it Chris?
Robert Alcala.
Robert, that doesn't sound anything like Chris. Sorry, Robert. Were you in the Last Mile program?
No. Okay.
That's like an inmate coding program, and like it's funny how you say that, because there is a small handful of Kenzie students that graduated from that program and then came into Kenzie. So they were pretty fresh out, like within a couple of weeks, in some situations, so a couple of months. And one of my good friends, she just got hired at a local startup here and is making pretty good money, just as good, probably better than some of us. In my experience, I don't really, I can't speak to it from a first person, but from like looking in, depending on like the community that you're in, like I know Kenzie, it's one of those things, like people that did come from the Last Mile program or were recently released, Kenzie never like said that information to anyone, but my classmates offered that up themselves once they felt comfortable with us. And I thought that was one really cool thing. And that's another thing to speak to the community. And depending on what boot camp you go to, some do like help you with job placement. And with that, and I know at Kenzie, like they will help you find the best thing for you. Because if it is a barrier to some people, it's 100% not a barrier to all people. And I even go as far to say most people, just because I've seen people be very successful and like, just like me, started their jobs right when they graduated. So I guess take that for what you will. But if you're thinking about which boot camp to go to, Kenzie's a very inclusive community for just like pretty much for everyone that steps foot in there and drinks the Kenzie Kool-Aid.
Okay.
Kind of help your question.
Thank you.
Robert, and I want to say welcome to our app too. I'm glad that this is your first day. I'm excited for you to meet everyone else on the app too. To add to what Maya said about breaking in with a criminal record, you'd be surprised how many resources there are for people who have gone through what you're going through, and now they're kind of throwing the rope back to help others do the same. Last Mile, it's one example of that type of program, and you can look it up. Also, it's about, and we talk about this on the podcast a lot, it's about turning your perceived disadvantages into advantages. What you could do, and I give this advice to everyone, is like, there's a pretty big community of, it's not huge, but there's a pretty big community of people in tech who do have a criminal record. And so you can tap into that community and get the introduction through the back door, because now you have something in common with them. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I share this, and I appreciate you being vulnerable, because there's other people on the call who are probably thinking the same thing. Some people are struggling with that credit, and they feel like their credit is not good enough to get into schools. And with Kenzie, at least, they offer Kenzie Hope. So everyone in Career Karma can get accepted into Kenzie Hope, which is basically a way for you to spend the first 30 days proving yourself that you can handle the coursework, and then your income sharing would get approved after the 30 days. So there's always those options. On the last AMA last week, the same question came up, and I shared this tweet of a guy who started his first day at Google like 2 weeks ago. And I'm gonna just real quick share the same screen, just so you know that you're not the only one, and there's other people out there who are gonna support you on this journey. So I shared the tweet in the chat too. You can check it out. But this just goes to show that in 2012 you can be in prison, and in 2019 you could be at Google. So just keep going and don't stop, man.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Awesome.
Actually, you know what, Roberto, I went to prison. I was just recently released, and Career Karma is taking a chance on helping me, bro. So there are people like us that are getting into tech that have got criminal backgrounds. That's not something you need to worry about at all, man. All right, there is a large community of us that are actually doing things. So you're not alone in this, all right?
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
And also, if you have a specific question, Robert, I'll put my email in here, and then I can even like connect you. Like, I have a homeboy in particular that I'm thinking about that I can like intro you to. So
thank you so much, Maya. And one last thing on that topic, I think on this journey, whenever you run into obstacles or you start doubting yourself, what helped me in my job search was always remembering that there are like hundreds of thousands of companies out there. Tech is taking over every industry, and you just need one company to give you a job, right? So as you're looking online at descriptions that might say they want someone with 6 years of experience, or like they want someone with a computer science degree, like look at it with a grain of salt. Like if there's so many companies out there that if they don't want someone with a criminal record, and there's definitely companies that will not give you an offer if you have a criminal record, it's fine, because there's, for every company that wouldn't, there's 10 that will. And for everyone that wouldn't accept someone who doesn't have a college degree, there's 10 others that will. So you just got to keep that mindset and keep going. And as long as you don't stop, there's nothing that's going to keep you away from getting there. Cool.
I had a question about the credit because I heard someone say that credit was required for the income sharing program. And I don't know what the credit score has to be because I'm a single mom and I'm like paying bills all the time. I try to keep it like, but it still needs work, you know, my credit.
Yeah. I can take this one. I think it depends on the school. So there's some schools that have no credit requirements. Then there's some that are. Income sharing, it's a form of payment where you don't pay until you get a job. But in some ways, since the school is taking a risk, not all income sharing agreements are the same. And so some schools have different requirements. So what I would say, the first thing I would say is if you get rejected from one school, let's say because your income sharing wasn't approved, it doesn't mean that there's other schools that will not accept you. And then if you are coming from Career Karma, we actually had conversations with Chuck back in July to create a pathway for people who have good credit. They just get qualified for income sharing right away. For people who don't, they get basically like a 30-day trial. And then if they just have to prove that they get through the program, then their income sharing gets approved regardless of what their credit score is.
Is there any way that we can get some resources to me, like specifically about my area, about Texas, where, you know, I could get approved to go to the schools? Because when I went to Lambda and I liked it, their program more than my other offer, because the other offer I got from Thinkful, they didn't mention income sharing at all. They wanted you to pay like $70 a month for 6 months, and then they said like $380. That's not feasible at all. And it wasn't after you find a job. It was when you starting the program. So also when I went to Lambda, they were like, well, we're not accepting Texas applicants at this time. And that was the school I really liked, the 17% for 2 years. And then when I went to Flatiron says they're going to take 10% of the income, which is at a minimum threshold of $40,000 when you leave the boot camp. You know, your job be $40,000. They're going to take 10% of that at a cap of 8 years. So, you know.
So it sounds like you're doing your research, which is great. What I would say is continue speaking to other schools and people attending, like students attending the schools. From the school's perspective, they'll give you all the information you need for you to understand, like, what are your options. Then you can reach out to students in Career Karma. You can reach out to our guests and ask them about like their experience going through it. And this is why you have the 21-day challenge to explore and figure out what path is going to be the right one for you.
Yeah, and I see it in the comments as well. James, you're correct. So at Kenzie specifically, the ISA, so it used to be at 17.5% of your income with a 2.7 time cap. Recently, because we've gotten more funding, or they have gotten more funding, it's now 13% for 2 to 4 years, depending on which program you do. And the cap is also lowered to 1.75. So say like you have a really well-paying job, if you pay like 1.75 times tuition, then like you finish early. So that's what that means. But I know that they do have requirements for the ISA, but I also do know that that Kenzie is very inspired and influenced by the potential of students. So it's definitely something to reach out to someone specifically to talk to about further.
Okay, thanks. Is there a way like recommendations and things in that nature could go in a person's favor?
Recommendations for what?
Like getting into the program, like say you were a person that were having hardships, you know, get into the ISA and things like that. If you found a good mentor.
Sorry to interrupt. What I was gonna say is, so everyone from Career Karma who gets accepted into Kenzie will get accepted for the ISA. If you do Kenzie Hope, that's something that Kenzie provided for people in Career Karma because they know people are going through the challenge and they're hustling and helping each other out. So as long as you get accepted into Kenzie, now you still have to pass their interview and the logical reasoning test. But once you get accepted, I wouldn't worry about passing the income sharing because they have Kenzie Hope, which is a way for you to start school, even if you have not so good credit. Okay?
Yes,
Cool.
that's great.
Awesome.
Hey, I'm sorry.
Jump in.
Okay, I'll go. For Maya, so can you speak more about how you were able to get your job search going and have your job already before boot camp? Because the boot camp is, from what I hear, because I'm just about to start, really intense. So making that time to also apply, go to interviews, and do that. So can you talk more about that process?
Yeah, so at Kenzie, I was in the program for a full year. I started out in the software engineering, then moved to UX engineering. And in that time for both programs, we worked on our portfolio. So are you going to software engineering or UX, you think?
Software.
Okay, so for that, are you familiar with GitHub or GitLab?
Yeah, so I used to be a data consultant, so I worked in tech before, just back in, like the real back end.
Okay.
And so now trying to learn more of the other stuff.
Okay, so yeah, your portfolio as a software engineering student, you're going to be making it while you go that whole year, because pretty much, I guess it's safe to say that every job is going to ask you for your GitHub link or for some projects, and then you literally have 12 months worth, and then it's kind of cool because they can really like see where you've come from and like how you're getting better. And then so in Kenzie, you're going to do, even for one program, you're going to do 2 capstones. You're going to do a pre-capstone, an actual real capstone, and those are full projects. And all of my friends have presented their capstone projects in their interview process. And then they speak about their capstone, other things that they've done at Kenzie, if they've ever been like a leader of a Scrum team, which is basically like a project manager. So yeah, that's how. And then also during the time of Kenzie, Kenzie wants to get more funding. Like, it's a startup, we're working to get more funding, and the best way to do that is to have a good success rate. So they're very invested in our past, like our post-Kenzie life at this point, especially because they're so new. So they really drill in like that interview prep. All you have to do is like seek it out and ask someone, and then there's 10 people willing to help you. So doing that, Kenzie now, it used to be a program from 9 to 5, but people had trouble who wanted to work jobs and also like job interviewing. So they changed it from 9 to 3 with office hours. So you'll definitely like have that time. And also Kenzie will bring in like their hiring partners. So for instance, Salesforce is a huge company here in Indianapolis. One of their headquarters is here. And there's many times where like Salesforce reps will come and interview students and then like hire them. So they bring in people. They also prep you to go out and do it on your own. You're going to be doing your portfolio pretty much the whole time you're there.
Hey Maya, can you speak about the Earn and Learn program? I'm not sure if you took part of it, but I know Kenzie offers it. Can you explain to folks how that works?
Yeah, so I actually did the Earn and Learn program for a couple months. You have a remote job through Kelly Services, which is a temp agency, and it's for a software company. It's for Apple. They just aren't allowed to say that on news outlets, but you're doing like Apple tech support. They send you all the gear you'll need. So they'll send you like an iMac, they'll send you like mouse, keyboard, phone. You can't use it at all though outside of the job. They do a really good job at locking all that stuff down. And they can even see you through your camera, so keep it covered. But it's a cool job for people that need it. I personally think that if you can help it, work as little as you possibly can. I had a job like 8 months through, or like for about 8 months of my time at Kenzie, and it was really hard when I finally decided to quit and just use a small loan. I was so much more productive, able to focus. But back to the earn and learn, it's cool because you're working at home, and you don't have to like leave anywhere or come back late. You're just in the other room. It is a very tough job, as with any customer service, especially when it's on the phone, because everyone has called the Apple store or like Apple support, but how many people have called it when they're actually in a good mood? Like zero. So, it's those types of woes. I personally, I think it's a great option for people that need it.
Where's Daddy?
Would not really recommend it. Who has a cute child? Because I just heard them.
I think it was Mohammed. I muted him, but.
Oh goodness. Okay, I love kids. But yeah, if you can help it, I'd say, try and stick through it, so you can study more. But if it's something that is not possible, because it's definitely not for a lot of people, that option is there. I personally did not, it didn't fancy me too well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's a good option to have for people just in case you need it, because most schools don't offer that, and then people are kind of stuck going to school, working an odd schedule. I think since Kenzie's partnered with Kelly Services, they make sure that the amount of hours that people work still allows them to stay in school. And I believe it's about 20 to 25 hours that you can work maximum. It's no more than 25.
Yes, that is correct. And then there are also other resources for people that may not be looking into Kenzie. Another thing I did that really helped me, I taught English online. So if anyone in here has a bachelor's degree, I taught ESL through this service called VIP Kid. And I'll write that down there. And with that, I was teaching 30-minute classes to kids in China. Like their parents would sign them up because they want them to learn English. The lessons were pre-written for you. You literally just had to go through the slides. The application process was maybe 2 weeks long. And yeah, it's just like you're video chatting with a child just like this, teaching them syllables. And that's really cool because I did that in the mornings. So I'm an early bird. So I would teach 4 classes a day. So from 6 to 8 a.m. And then I'd get ready and then go to Kenzie. And the pay was also good. Depending on the class or on your load, you got paid between $7 and $10 per 25-minute class. So that's also an option. And there are tons of ESL places like that. I don't really know much more about jobs that you can do solely online. But yeah, that's what I did. And I thought that worked for me really well.
Cool. Maya, let me ask you this. Can you explain to people what you do on a daily basis? What does your role as a UX engineer entail? Tell us a little bit about your company and how you're liking your new job.
Yeah, so I work at Crafted. We're a small consulting company, so we do projects for other people. It's 13 of us, and I'm their first UX engineer. So what I do from day to day, it really just depends on what's going on. So on my UX days, for instance, I'm working on an app for Big Brothers Big Sisters. It's pretty much for bigs to look through and find events that could benefit their littles. And we're doing a version 2 of that. So what I'm doing right now, I'm doing focus group testing with the current bigs to see how they feel about the app, what's working, what's not working, and then we're going to add additional features for version 2. So I'm doing the testing. After that, I'm going to like compile all this data and sift through all that to see what we should do for version 2 and how to go about doing that. So I'm pretty much the person that makes those decisions right before my CEO. So that, and then I also, once this project goes a little bit further, I'm going to be like actually designing out these features in the UI format. So I'm going to be designing their mobile site, and then I'm going to be testing that again with the people. And then that's when I pass it on to the dev team, which is also kind of sort of me because I'm a UX engineer. So I also code in the front end. So most times, since I'm the only UX person, that's where I stop. But if it's slow, then I'll pick up some dev work. So essentially for that, there are tickets that need to be done, whether it's Big Brothers Big Sisters or a different app. And I do pretty much most of the styling. So I'll style things in React. Essentially, so the developers don't have to do it, because a lot of people really dislike CSS just because it's so pixel by pixel. But as a UX engineer, I really like that. So that's kind of what I stick to.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions about Maya's role and like what she does on a daily basis? Any questions about that?
I do. Hi, my name is Diarte. I'm kind of in the middle of multitasking right now, so that's why you can't see my face. But overall, my question is in regards to growth and development. With you being a recent graduate and all, like, starting out in the company, how open and how flexible was the company to you in regards to your growth and development within the position, and just kind of pretty much growing into your role as a UX engineer?
Could you clarify just a little bit, like, would they like, you're talking about like educational growth or just like moving up in the company?
Well, not just moving up in the company, but just being kind of a new graduate, and just kind of, because the thing is, like, you have a lot of companies that are thinking, oh, well, so-and-so isn't coming from a traditional school or whatnot, so I don't know if, they know everything that they should know that a traditional school would teach. So, how did you, pretty much, have you had that experience to where the company has been very flexible about that, and they basically allowed you to kind of grow into the role and just, show what you can do? Or was it like, you had to meet a certain level before getting it?
So pretty much from my experience and from what I've heard from my friends as well, when people hire junior developers, you hire them knowing that you're going to teach them something and that there's going to be like onboarding time. Just because even with people coming from college and with people coming from boot camps, because you know how with college you learn like the theory of CS and like you may learn some languages, but you're not going to be as current as you need. So when you come in, you're gonna like start learning these technologies that they specifically use. And same with the boot camp, they know that you've been doing this for a year or less, So they are open to teaching you and giving you their knowledge because they know that you jumped off the deep end to do this boot camp. So they know that you're willing to learn and that you're hungry to learn. So I think that's one pro of a boot camp kid. And speaking specifically to Indiana, there is a huge shortage in developers. There are tons of open jobs and not enough developers. So a lot of places don't require degrees, and then they also don't look down at people who don't have degrees either, just because in Indianapolis alone, like Kenzie is the third boot camp in the past couple of years, and there are currently 2 boot camps that are headquartered here in Indy. So the community is very familiar with it. Yeah, so they're familiar with it, and then in my experience, juniors, they know that they're gonna have to teach you, just because think about JavaScript alone. Like with JavaScript, there are like so many different frameworks. Like you have like React, you have Vue, you have just normal JavaScript, and each place is gonna do something different. So you're going to learn, and they know that.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Maya. And thank you for taking the time to, speak to all of us, by the way.
Oh, no, this is super fun. No, I totally enjoy. I see, I'm looking at some questions on the side.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
I got accepted by Kenzie yesterday.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I've found in the Career Karma app that one of the practices they always do is dealing with people at your level and then one step ahead. So kind of like a mentor thing, which I found helpful. I've asked people who are in Kenzie right now about their, what's going on there, and that's been very helpful. I've actually had interaction with Timur on a couple of occasions because I was freaking out about the ISA agreement. And so my question to you is, did you have a mentor when you were going through the program? So were there people available to you that you were able to, who were ahead of you in the program, that you were able to speak with while you're going through the process?
Yes. So Kenzie has tons of levels. They have coaches for each cohort, which are students in later cohorts. So most people feel comfortable asking dumb questions to them just because they just did it and they probably ask the same questions. Then we have the actual instructors who are there to help you out. Then we have the people that Chalk, the CEO, that he brings in. Like, remember I spoke about the random CEOs that he just flies in? Pretty much all of the people that I've reached out to from like that group of folks, they've always like messaged me back if I had like specific questions about being a CEO or things like that. So like the big level people. And then we also here in Indy have some local mentors that come by Kenzie quite frequently. So to answer your question, yes, there are tons of people around to talk to you and help you. Just kind of depends on who you want to talk to on that day.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and let me also say that we have the Kenzie Academy squad on the app. I think the last, just checking right now, I think there's about 248 members. And Chuck, the CEO, is actually in the squad along with a few admissions people. And so as you're going through the process and you have questions, you can ask questions and get answers from Kenzie. There are students who already are in Kenzie who are managing the group. And you have a lot of resources now just to kind of make this big decision for yourself. And as you're going through this, don't forget to reach out to people. I'm not sure if you felt it, Ryan, yet, but people probably are reaching out to you as well. And you get to speak to them and pass on some of the guidance that you received early on. And so today, I think if people just help people, we'll be way further than just spending 4 years going back to college, paying some professor that doesn't even know all of the latest technologies that companies are using to build their apps. So keep doing what you're doing, reaching out to me and everyone else. We do have 5 minutes left, and I want to be respectful of Maya's time. What I'll say is I'll share the link to Kenzie so you can check out more about them. But I always ask our guests to share with us how they deal with imposter syndrome. And so Maya, on this journey, like, you may have experienced that along the way, and I would love for you to share with our community what you did to overcome that feeling of feeling like an imposter.
For me, to overcome imposter syndrome, a lot of times I'd get with my group of friends, because we were all feeling it, especially at the beginning and especially at the end. So we kind of just get together and talk through it, and hearing other people think that they suck at developing when they're really the smartest person in the room, kind of realize that everyone has like an oddly skewed view of themselves and their skills. So that kind of helped me like realize, okay, everyone feels like this, but that's not the case with any of these people, probably not me either. And then also surrounding myself in the technology, in like the tech ecosystem of Indiana. So I would go, and I still do, I go to so many meetups. I'm the director of one meetup, Women Who Code, but aside from that, I still go to at least 5 meetups outside of Women Who Code a month. And then I try to do at least 1 coffee date a week. Really, that's probably like 2 to 3 per month right now because I'm really busy. But just being in the tech field and then knowing people, because once you go to enough things, you kind of notice that there are those familiar faces. So it's less intimidating that way, because you're starting to know who's in the room and they see who you are. And like out in the real world, they don't look at you as a student, they just look at you as a developer, and they take like what you say as face value. So if you talk down to yourself like me and all my friends do to each other, then it's like, oh, what's going on with this person? But if you like go in and like actually have like that dialogue, and if you don't know, just like say like, oh, could you explain? But just being around other tech-minded people just makes it way easier for me.
That's a great answer, Maya. And I would also add to that like naturally we kind of self-criticize ourselves. And on this journey, one of the hardest things that you'll encounter is actually feeling like you're an engineer, right? Because on this journey, you're going to be learning a lot, but there's not going to be a point where you'll naturally start feeling as an engineer. You just have to fake it till you make it. And all of you, everyone who's on the call now, you're all engineers, because you've written a line of code, you did a web page, or you solved a problem. Now it's just a matter of becoming better at it, and it's going to be hard. You're going to have to force yourself. But I think over time, once you start looking at things that you've built, like you built a web page, you've built an app, you've solved some problem using code, then you actually start feeling like, hey, I can do this. And definitely seek out peers who can just kind of shake you out of it. They can, whenever you feel self-doubt, they can just point it out to you and tell you that they also feel self-doubt. So you never feel like you're by yourself. And Stella asked, what is the imposter syndrome? I would say there's a lot of different definitions. I think the imposter syndrome, the best way I can describe it is basically like kind of like being around people, and then you have this like moment inside of your gut where you're like holy shit, what did I get myself into? Like, this is not for me, because like everyone around me is way smarter than me, or like everyone around me not only is way smarter than me, but everyone will just realize that I'm an imposter and I shouldn't be here. So that's actually what imposter syndrome is, and everyone feels it. I feel it running Career Karma because I've never done it before, and I felt it when I was in the boot camp. And it's just one of those things where you might start feeling it. You have to just stop yourself, become aware of it, and just move on and continue with your day. I want to once again thank Maya for coming and joining us. Thank you so much, Maya. Thanks for sharing your experience doing Kenzie. We'll definitely have you back. And I'll speak to Arthur and Ruben, and I think you would be a perfect guest for our podcast too, for the Breaking into Startups podcast. And for those of you who did just join, Ruben, who is the CEO of Career Karma, he's actually having a CEO kickoff, also live on a Zoom. So I'm going to share the Zoom link on here. So as we're ending this meeting, if this is your first few days and you haven't met Ruben yet, he's doing a live call right now, so you can hop on and say hi to him, and he'll explain to you the next steps. But let's give Maya a round of applause for coming in and giving us such an amazing presentation. Thank you so much, Maya.
Thanks for having me here. I put my email in there one more time if you guys have questions.